Imagine for a second trying to run a country's transitional government, like actually coordinating executive branch decisions from the exact same Discord voice channel you use to coordinate, raids in World of Warcraft.
Right, which sounds completely insane.
Yeah, it sounds like a premise for a cyberpunk novel or something.
Right.
But in Nepal, an entire generation of young people didn't just, imagine bypassing their physical parliament with a digital one. They literally did it.
It is honestly a stunning mechanical shift in how we think about the architecture of a state. I mean, we are so used to the idea that power resides in, well, physical buildings with columns and marble floors.
For the traditional institution.
Exactly. But when those physical structures completely lose their legitimacy, the power doesn't just disappear, right? It migrates. And in this specific case, it migrated to servers and encrypted group chats.
That concept alone, that dramatic migration of power is just, well, it's just one piece of the massive puzzle we are putting together today. We're taking you on a deeply intense, globe-trotting exploration of a sprawling blog post.
And it really is sprawling.
Oh, massively. It's dated April 19th, 2026. The author is Paramendra Kunar Bhagat, who goes by the moniker Barackface online. And the text mentions a super fascinating detail about his background, actually.
Yeah, that he was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Right, which is wild.
It is, but it grounds him in this very specific type of grassroots, street-level political organizing. Like, he understands how movements are built door to door. But what makes this piece so compelling to read is how far he zooms out. The scope of his analysis moves from that localized political organizing to macro geopolitics and then eventually into, like, literal post-scarcity futurism.
Yeah, the post is titled, South Africa Ripe for Revolution, Kill Criminality, Kill the Corruption. But honestly, calling it a blog post feels like a massive understatement.
It really does. It reads more like a manifesto.
Exactly. A geopolitical manifesto written by someone who has, like, one foot in the gritty reality of current failing states and the other foot in a sci-fi utopia. I mean, you're reading this thing and the whiplash is intense.
Oh, absolutely.
You go from the horrific mechanics of gang extortion in South Africa to the tactical deployment of bulldozers against mafias in India to that Gen Z revolution in Nepal we just talked about.
Right.
And then suddenly you're reading this flurry of tweets from Elon Musk about artificial intelligence giving everyone a penthouse.
Yeah, on the surface, it reads almost like a fever dream of algorithmically generated news. I mean, it's just everywhere.
It is everywhere.
But if you look closely at the underlying mechanics of the text, there is a highly structured, surgically precise argument being made. The author isn't just throwing random world events at a wall to see what sticks.
Okay, so let's map that out for everyone listening. What is the actual connective tissue between, say, a mafia extortion racket and an AI-generated penthouse?
Well, the central thesis is about prerequisites. The author argues that we are standing on the precipice of utopian technological abundance. Basically an era where AI and robotics can, essentially solve material scarcity.
Right.
But, and this is the core argument, a country can only cross that threshold and participate in that incredible future if it first secures the absolute baseline of civilization, which is uncompromising law and order.
Oh, okay. So it's basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but applied to a nation state.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Like, you can't leapfrog into an AI-driven post-scarcity utopia if your citizens are getting shaken down for protection money just to keep their bakery open.
Exactly. You can't upload a failing state into the cloud. If the foundational layer of physical security is compromised, well, every technological or economic layer you try to build on top of it will simply be looted.
Man, that brings us perfectly to the author's starting point, which is the diagnosis of South Africa. And the diagnosis is pretty grim.
It's incredibly grim.
The author introduces this concept of a paralyzing criminal corruption complex. And the way it's described in the text, it's not like the government is over here trying its best and the criminals are over there breaking the law.
No, not at all. The text pushes a much darker sociological framework. The author argues that corruption within the state and criminality on the streets are not just coexisting phenomena.
Right.
They're the exact same enterprise wearing two different suits.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of that because the author uses a very vivid biological metaphor here. They describe this complex as a parasite feeding on a dying host. And if you think about how a real parasite operates, it doesn't just extract blood, right? It often injects a numbing agent into the host so the host doesn't feel the extraction happen.
Right, or it compromises the host's immune system so there's no defensive response at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful way to conceptualize the author's point.
It really is, because the numbing agent in this geopolitical context is institutional paralysis. The criminal corruption complex actively compromises the police force, the prosecuting authorities, the procurement boards.
So the immune system is down.
Completely down. So when the extraction happens, whether that's a street gang demanding extortion money or a politician diverting public funds, the state's immune system doesn't react.
Let's look at the real-world consequences of that paralyzed immune system. Because the source provides some just brutal examples. We're talking about extortion rackets targeting small businesses, farm murders, cash-in-transit heists.
Yeah, the violence is systemic.
It is. We're talking about sophisticated criminal syndicates acting almost as a parallel government, literally controlling entire neighborhoods in major economic hubs like Cape Town, Durban, and Johannesburg.
And this leads to a phenomenon that the text highlights, which is, well, it's the ultimate symptom of a dying host. The state becomes so corroded that it mechanically cannot even accept free resources.
Wait, free resources?
Yeah. The author points out that international donors become terrified to provide medical equipment, food aid, or infrastructure grants.
Oh, because they know the supply chain is completely captured.
Precisely.
So if a foreign government donates like a state-of-the-art neonatal incubator to a rural hospital, it doesn't just magically appear in the ward. It has to go through ports, customs, transport logistics, local health department inventories.
There are dozens of touch points.
Right. And the fear is that at any point in that chain, middlemen, fake logistics companies, or connected politicians will simply siphon it off. The incubator either ends up sold on a black market somewhere, or a shell company charges the state an exorbitant handling fee that drains the health budget anyway.
Exactly. The institutional decay is so profound that philanthropy itself becomes a vector for theft. It's really tragic.
It's incredibly bleak. And the human cost of this extraction is probably most visible in the data the source provides on education.
No, the PRLS data, yeah.
Yeah, there is a statistic embedded in one of the tweets in the text that is genuinely difficult to process. It cites the PRLS 2021 study, which evaluates reading comprehension globally. According to this data, 81% of grade 4 children in South Africa cannot read for meaning in any of the country's 11 official languages.
It's staggering. That is 914,000 children out of 1.1 million who are functionally illiterate at that grade level.
Over 8 in 10 kids.
Yeah, ranking the country dead last out of 43 countries evaluated.
That isn't just a failing grade, that's the structural engineering of a lost generation. But here's where I want to challenge the author's framing for a second.
Sure, let's do it.
The text aggressively dismisses things like inclusive growth policies and social compact conferences as mere theater. But if 81% of kids can't read, shouldn't economic policy and education funding be the absolute highest priority?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. Is the author really suggesting that we just ignore economic policy completely right now?
Well, the author isn't suggesting that education is unimportant. Rather, they are making an argument about operational sequencing.
Operational sequencing, okay.
Right. Prosperity in this framework does not begin with an education subsidy or a new syllabus. It begins with the state reclaiming its monopoly on legitimate violence.
Oh, so the classic Weberian definition of a state.
Yeah.
The sole entity legally allowed to use physical force.
Exactly, because look at the mechanics of trying to fix that reading deficit in a captured state. You can allocate $1 billion to a literacy program, right?
Right?
But if the construction mafia extorts the contractor building the new school, and then the local gangs strip the copper wiring and steal the computers before the school even opens, and then corrupt officials put ghost teachers on the payroll to siphon the salaries, that $1 billion evaporates.
Wow.
The policy is theater because the physical reality on the ground simply does not allow the policy to be executed. The author's position is secure the physical perimeter first, neutralize the parasites, and only then can you actually build the school.
That makes a chilling kind of sense. So until the security baseline is established, all other state functions are effectively nullified.
Exactly.
And where the source gets really fascinating is how it connects this localized physical paralysis to the global technological frontier. The author brings in this massive current standoff regarding Starlink, the satellite internet constellation.
This is a perfect case study of the author's thesis. The text notes that SpaceX has committed $28 million to support rural development across 5,000 schools in South Africa.
Which directly addresses that 81% illiteracy statistic.
Oof.
I mean, if you can bypass the physical vulnerability of copper wires and fiber optic cables, which, as we just said, get stolen.
Right, the physical infrastructure is too vulnerable.
Exactly, and just beam high-speed internet directly from low Earth orbit to a dish on the roof of a rural school, you instantly connect those kids to global educational resources. But the text states Starlink is blocked from operating there.
It is, and the macroeconomic cost of that blockage is actually quantified in the text using World Bank data.
What does the data say?
The data suggests that a 10% increase in broadband penetration can raise GDP growth by 1.21% in a developing economy.
Wait, really? Just a 10% increase in broadband?
Yes. So by preventing satellite internet from operating, the state isn't just hurting those schools, it is actively, mechanically strangling its own aggregate GDP growth.
Now, why is it blocked? This is where the source dives into some extremely turbulent waters.
Very turbulent.
We're going to touch on some deeply polarized quotes here from the source, including statements from Elon Musk and Donald Trump about race, legislation, and violence in South Africa. And just to be absolutely 100% clear for you listening to this deep dive, our goal today is not to validate, endorse, or fact-check these specific incendiary claims.
No, not at all.
We are strictly impartial here. We take no sides. We are simply mapping out how the author of this blog post uses these external, highly politically charged quotes to build his own, somewhat counterintuitive argument.
And it is essential context to go over them because the author uses this external political noise as a contrast to his own thesis.
Right.
The text includes social media claims that Starlink is blocked because of race-based ownership rules, specifically legislation that requires telecom companies to have a certain percentage of ownership by historically disadvantaged individuals.
And the text embeds a highly controversial tweet from Elon Musk reacting to this, where Musk literally states there are now, quote, more anti-white and anti-Asian laws in South Africa than anti-black laws under apartheid.
Yeah.
He explicitly calls it apartheid 2.0 and suggests the country needs to be sanctioned.
The author also includes a video clip of Donald Trump speaking at a rally where Trump claims that a genocide is occurring in South Africa, alleging that people are being killed specifically if they're white, and he also calls for severe economic sanctions.
I mean, these are maximum voltage political statements.
Maximum voltage, yes.
They frame the crisis in South Africa as fundamentally a race war, or at least a state executing racially targeted persecution. But Paramendra Kumar Bhagat, the author of the blog post, takes all of this incredibly explosive material and actually pivots the entire narrative.
He really does. He uses those quotes to demonstrate how the international community is fundamentally misdiagnosing the disease.
How so?
Well, the author explicitly addresses the racial framing and rejects it as the core issue. He refers to political slogans like "kill the Boer," which have generated massive international outrage, obviously as a racial ghost from the past.
That phrasing is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
A racial ghost.
Yeah.
He's saying that the politicians and the international commentators are distracted by the specter of race, shadowboxing with historical demons, while completely missing the actual mechanics of the current collapse.
Precisely. The author's argument is that the true enemy in South Africa today is not a specific racial group. The enemy is the criminal corruption complex itself.
Because it's an equal opportunity predator.
Exactly. The text explicitly states that this mafia state prevents all South Africans, black, colored, Indian, and white alike, from building wealth, operating businesses, and raising their families in safety.
So if an extortion gang shuts down a bakery in a township, they don't care about the owner's race.
Yeah.
They just care about the cash register.
Yeah.
The author is basically telling the world, you're looking at a mafia state extracting resources, and you are confusing it for a racial conflict. And until you realize it's a mafia state, you can't apply the right cure.
Which perfectly sets up the pivot to part 3 of the text. If the diagnosis is a deeply entrenched, violent mafia state, how do you mechanically break it?
Right.
To answer that, the author points South Africa across the Indian Ocean, specifically to India's largest state, Uttar Pradesh, and the tenure of Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath.
Right, okay. But to understand the author's proposed cure, we really need to understand the baseline of the patient. Like, what was Uttar Pradesh or UP actually like before Adityanath took office in March 2017? Because the text paints a picture of a state that had essentially flatlined.
UP was widely referred to as a BMARU state. The acronym literally translates to sick in Hindi. It was synonymous with Mafia Raj, which means the rule of mafias.
And we aren't talking about pickpockets here.
No, no.
The text describes highly organized systemic syndicates. Sand mafias controlling riverbeds, land mafias illegally seizing property, and pervasive extortion rackets.
Yeah, industrial-scale crime.
Right. These groups didn't just operate in the shadows. They had captured the local economy to the point where they were the de facto authorities in many regions. Capital entirely avoided the state because the invisible tax of extortion was too high and the physical risk to personnel was just too great.
It was essentially a mirror image of the paralysis the author sees in South Africa today. So Yogi Adityanath comes into power, and he implements what the text describes as a three-pillar blueprint of zero tolerance.
Okay.
And the first pillar is the application of overwhelming proactive state force.
The text provides numbers here that are genuinely shocking. Since 2017, the Uttar Pradesh police conducted over 15,700 encounters.
And for listeners who might not be familiar with the terminology in that region, an encounter typically refers to a police shootout with suspected criminals.
And the human toll of those 15,700 encounters is staggering. The text notes that 256 hardened criminals were eliminated, nearly 32,000 were arrested, and over 10,000 were injured.
It's a massive escalation.
The message, according to the author, was unambiguous, right? The state was reclaiming its monopoly on violence, and it would meet force with overwhelming force.
But it's the second pillar where the mechanics of breaking a mafia state get truly controversial and, frankly, highly effective from an economic standpoint. The text details the bulldozer policy.
Right, let's look at the mechanics of this, because just reading the words bulldozer policy doesn't quite capture what's actually happening on the ground.
Not at all.
The state identified illegal properties. We're talking palatial mansions, massive commercial complexes, shopping centers that were built using the proceeds of organized crime. And they literally drove earth movers through the front doors and razed them to the ground.
Yeah.
The text claims that properties worth over 14,000 crore rupees were seized or destroyed.
Let's contextualize that number because 14,000 crore can sound abstract.
Please do.
A crore is 10 million, so 14,000 crore rupees translates to roughly 1.6 to 1.7 billion US dollars.
Okay, wait. $1.6 billion worth of real estate destroyed.
Destroyed.
That isn't just knocking down a few kingpins' houses. That is the systematic eradication of entire commercial districts if they're funded by mafia money.
I mean, I have to push back here.
The text itself notes that the Supreme Court has occasionally had to intervene on these demolition notices. Isn't this an egregious violation of due process? You're using a bulldozer instead of a courtroom. What about the families living in those homes or the legitimate businesses renting space in those commercial complexes?
It is the ultimate blunt force instrument, and the human rights and due process criticisms surrounding it are profound. And, to be fair, the author does not hide from that controversy.
Right.
However, the author asks us to look at the economic logic behind the bulldozer. Why not just arrest the gang boss?
Because if you just put the boss in jail, the commercial complex he built with extortion money is still collecting rent.
Exactly. The money is still working. The criminal syndicate still has cash flow. They can still pay off corrupt guards. They can still fund their operations from inside a cell. The real estate is the battery powering the mafia.
The battery.
By physically destroying the asset, Adityanath wasn't just sending a symbolic message, he was evaporating their economic base.
The author writes that through this brute force economic destruction, fear shifted from the citizens to the criminals.
Yes.
And once that physical dominance was reestablished, the third pillar was implemented, which was technological and institutional reforms.
Having cleared the ground, they brought in anti-Romeo squads to focus specifically on women's safety in public spaces. They launched Mission Shakti. They blanketed the state in CCTV networks, implemented data-driven policing algorithms, and set up fast-track courts to bypass the notoriously slow traditional justice system.
So it's a very specific sequence we're looking at.
Very specific.
You cannot start with the CCTV cameras if the gangs are just going to shoot them out or bribe the guy monitoring the feed, right?
Exactly.
You apply overwhelming kinetic force, you destroy the economic battery of the syndicates, and then you install the technology to maintain the newly secured perimeter.
And the macroeconomic results of the sequence, at least as presented in the source, are exactly what the author wants South Africa to pay attention to. The drop in violent crime is massive heinous crimes dropped 85%, and dacoity, which is armed robbery or banditry, fell by 94%.
Wow.
But the economic transformation is what really proves the thesis.
Let's do the math on the economic shift because it is wild. Between 2017 and 2025, foreign direct investment, or FDI, into Uttar Pradesh hit 16,316 crore rupees.
Which is nearly $2 billion US dollars.
And the text points out that this amount is 5 times the total FDI the state received in the entire 17 years prior to Adityanath taking office combined.
The gross state domestic product more than doubled, reaching 30.25 lakh crore rupees.
Which is roughly 360 billion US dollars. They are now targeting a $1 trillion economy by 2030. I mean, they have defense corridors, electronics manufacturing hubs, massive data centers operating in places that literally a decade ago were controlled by guys illegally mining sand with private militias.
It's a total paradigm shift. And if you're listening to this and wondering how a government turns a sand mafia fiefdom into a data center hub, the answer the author provides is pretty simple. Predictability. Capital is a coward. It flees uncertainty.
Right, that makes sense.
The moment you remove the unpredictable variable of extortion, the math for investors suddenly makes sense. The state didn't necessarily discover a new natural resource. They just stopped the bleeding.
So the message to South Africa is clear, right? You need a leader willing to wield the bulldozer, metaphorically or literally, to break the criminal corruption complex. But that creates a massive logistical problem.
It certainly does.
If the current political elite is benefiting from the corruption, they aren't exactly going to vote themselves out of power. How do you actually install a disruptive leader when the system is rigged to protect the status quo?
And that is the perfect bridge to the author's second major case study. If Uttar Pradesh provides the blueprint for what to do once in power, the events in Nepal in late 2025 provide the blueprint for how to capture that power in the first place.
Okay, so we're moving from top-down authoritarian statecraft to bottom-up, decentralized digital revolution.
Yes.
And what triggers this revolution in Nepal isn't a rigged election or a bread riot. It is a government ban on 26 social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp.
Which is a classic desperate move by an entrenched elite trying to control the flow of information.
Totally.
But instead of quelling dissent, it acted as an accelerant. The text describes how what began as a protest against an internet blackout rapidly metastasized into a full-scale, leaderless uprising by Gen Z against decades of systemic corruption.
I really want to focus on the mechanics of a leaderless digital uprising, because it's fascinating. In the past, revolutions required a charismatic figurehead giving speeches in a town square, right? Printing pamphlets, organizing physical meetings.
Exactly, a centralized hierarchy.
But here, the young people of Nepal, many literally still in their school uniforms, clashed with security forces and set public buildings on fire, including the parliament, without a central command structure.
Because the command structure was decentralized across encrypted networks. When the government banned the main platforms, the youth simply migrated to VPNs, Telegram, Discord, and other decentralized nodes. They crowdsourced their tactics in real time.
The human cost was severe, though. The text notes 76 deaths.
Yes, is a very bloody.
But the velocity of the political collapse was breathtaking. They completely bypassed the traditional negotiation mechanisms. They didn't form a committee to talk to the prime minister, KP Sharma Oli. They just made the country ungovernable until he was forced to resign within days.
And this brings us back to that incredible detail we opened the show with. With the prime minister gone and the physical parliament literally ablaze and delegitimized, the youth needed to form a transitional government.
And they did it on a Discord server.
Yes.
Former Chief Justice Sushila Karki was voted in as the interim prime minister through a digital plebiscite organized on a platform designed for gamers. I mean, it's totally wild to think about.
It is the ultimate repudiation of legacy institutions. The youth looked at the marble columns of the parliament and basically said, this building does not represent us. It represents the people stealing from us. Our sovereignty now resides in this server.
What were the specific grievances driving this anger, though? Beyond just wanting their WhatsApp access back, why were they willing to burn down the parliament?
Well, the author highlights two deeply connected economic realities. First, crushing youth unemployment, which had forced millions of young Nepalese to emigrate for menial labor, creating an economy highly dependent on remittances.
Right.
And second, the visceral anger directed at the Nepo babies.
Ah, that hashtag Nepo baby went viral during the protests.
It did.
It was this intense friction between the youth who are forced to leave their country just to survive and the children of the political elite who are flaunting luxury lifestyles on Instagram. funded entirely by state capture and nepotism. The social contract was entirely broken.
Which is why, when elections were finally held in March 2026, the revolution didn't just fade away. They didn't just go back home.
Right.
They translated their street power and their digital coordination into absolute electoral dominance. They routed the old guard entirely.
And they elected Balin Shah as prime minister. Let's look at Balin because his profile is so non-traditional. He's 35 years old. He is a structural engineer by trade. He previously served as the mayor of Kathmandu. And perhaps most famously, he is a former rapper. He actually shows up to his swearing-in ceremony wearing his trademark black cap and sunglasses.
He represents a total aesthetic and generational break from the past. But more importantly, the author focuses on Balin's platform. He was elected with a very specific, ruthless dual mandate.
What was it?
First, dismantle the criminal political nexus and end the era of impunity. Basically, no more Nepo babies getting state contracts. And second, focus with laser precision on rapid economic growth, specifically leveraging Nepal's potential in tourism, hydropower, and digital governance.
Notice what is missing from that mandate, too. There is no heavy ideological baggage. He didn't run on a complex Marxist or neoliberal manifesto.
No.
He ran as an engineer. The logic is the pipes are clogged with corruption, I am going to clear the pipes, and then we're going to pump economic growth through them.
And this is exactly where Paramendra Kumar Bhagat brings all the threads together in his post. He takes the brute force security imperative of Uttar Pradesh and the decentralized digital youth revolution of Nepal, and he points them directly at the youth of South Africa.
He is laying out a highly specific roadmap. The author writes that the old liberation narrative in South Africa is dead. The generation that fought apartheid, the generation that holds the moral high ground of history, has, according to the text, become the entrenched elite overseeing the current criminal corruption complex.
The author's message to Gen Z in South Africa is that you cannot eat historical legacy. You need a governance narrative, and you cannot negotiate with a parasite.
Right.
The text is literally telling the youth to abandon polite commissions of inquiry. Use your smartphones to coordinate, use the streets to protest, use the ballot box to rout the old guard, and demand an absolute clean break.
He provides this incredibly vivid target image for them to aim at. He writes, quote, "Picture a 35-year-old prime minister on the cover of Time magazine as a symbol that competence and integrity have finally returned to the Union buildings."
Right.
The Union buildings being the official seat of government in Pretoria. He basically wants a South African Balin Shah.
Because the underlying philosophy of this entire manifesto is that establishing law and order is not a partisan issue, it's not a right-wing issue, and it's certainly not a racial issue.
It's foundational.
It is the inescapable prerequisite for civilization. If the state cannot stop a gang from extorting a local clinic, literally nothing else matters.
Which finally brings us to the ultimate question. Why does any of this matter? Why go through the pain of revolution and the controversy of bulldozing mafia assets?
Good question.
And this is where the deep dive takes a massive, exhilarating leap into speculative futurism. Because if the first half of this text is a gritty manual on how to fix a broken state, the second half is a roadmap to utopia.
It really is. The text features this fascinating constant undercurrent of embedded tweets, primarily from Elon Musk, discussing artificial intelligence, robotics, and the fundamental mechanics of a post-scarcity economy.
To understand this, we have to completely dismantle how we think about money.
Yes, we do.
The author includes a quote from Musk that is a profound reframing of economics. Musk says, quote, "People get confused sometimes. They think an economy is money. Money is the database for exchange of goods and services. Money doesn't have power in and of itself. The actual economy is goods and services."
Let's break down the mechanics of that database concept because it's crucial. In our current reality, human labor is the primary bottleneck for creating goods and services, which makes those things scarce.
Okay.
If you want a house built, humans have to cut the wood, transport the wood, swing the hammers. Because those things take human time and energy, they are scarce. Money is just the ledger we use to keep score and decide who gets access to that scarce house.
Okay, I follow that. But then the text introduces the massive deflationary shock of artificial intelligence and humanoid robotics.
Yeah.
Musk argues that AI and robots will soon be able to perform almost any physical or cognitive task a human can do.
And this is where the math of the economy breaks down in the best possible way. Imagine a supply chain where an AI identifies a lithium deposit. AI-driven robotic mining equipment extracts it. Autonomous electric trains transport it to a fully automated factory managed by an AI logistics system. Humanoid robots manufacture a battery, and a drone delivers it to your house.
Human labor has been entirely removed from the equation.
Exactly. And because robots don't need health insurance, sleep, or a living wage, the cost of production drops to the absolute cost of energy and raw materials.
Wow.
And if AI optimizes solar and fusion energy, the cost of energy approaches zero as well. When the cost of production plummets to near zero, the cost of the final good plummets to near zero.
It's massive structural deflation. The goods and services multiply by, as the text says, several orders of magnitude, far outpacing any increase in the money supply.
Yeah.
So the things we need to live basically become free.
And because human labor is largely displaced in this scenario, Musk proposes what he calls universal high income. Not a basic survival income, but a high income.
How does that not cause hyperinflation, though? I mean, if the government just prints money and gives everyone $1 million a month, a loaf of bread usually ends up costing $10,000, right?
Because inflation only happens when you have too much money chasing too few goods. But in the AI economy, the supply of goods is virtually infinite. The robots can bake 1 billion loaves of bread a day for pennies.
Oh, I see.
The government can issue the universal high income to facilitate the database of exchange, but the sheer volume of production absorbs the currency without driving up prices.
So what does that actually look like for a human being living in that world? The text references the culture books by the science fiction author Ian M. Banks.
Yes. Musk frequently points to the Culture series as his idealized vision of the future. It depicts an interstellar, post-scarcity society managed by vastly intelligent, benevolent AIs called minds.
Right.
In this society, money barely exists, nobody has to work unless they want to, and humans spend their lives pursuing art, adventure, and pleasure. As the tweet embedded in the text notes, in this vision, everyone can have a penthouse if they want.
Because building a penthouse costs the AI nothing in terms of human labor, but it goes beyond just material luxury like penthouses.
Oh, way beyond.
The text includes a tweet from Siobhan Zilis, an executive at Neuralink, discussing their brain-computer interfaces. She talks about the realistic timeline for enabling quadriplegics to walk again and regain the use of their hands.
It's a vision of total liberation. Liberation from material poverty, liberation from necessary labor, and even liberation from the biological constraints of disease and injury.
And this is the brilliant unifying thread of Paramendra Kumar Bhagat's entire manifesto. I mean, why does he combine Sadhguru talking about the critical importance of preserving topsoil alongside May Musk celebrating her 78th birthday by embracing a life of adventure, alongside Donald Trump's geopolitical threats, Yogi Adityanath bulldozing mafia mansions, and a 35-year-old Nepali rapper overthrowing his government?
Because he is contrasting two intensely divergent timelines for humanity. Timeline A is the fragile biological misery of the captured state. It's the parasite feeding on the dying host.
Right.
It is a world where 81% of children can't read, where small businesses are extorted by thugs, and where human potential is crushed by the gravity of corruption.
And Timeline B is the Culture series. It's the post-scarcity AI utopia where quadriplegics walk, robots build the penthouses, and humanity is free to explore the universe.
But the crucial final argument of the text is that Timeline B is locked behind a door, and the only key that opens that door is uncompromising governance.
Yes.
You cannot participate in the AI revolution if your local politicians are stealing the fiber optic cables. You have to clean house first.
You have to secure the perimeter before you can build the penthouse. Let's recap the sheer distance we've covered today. We started with the grim diagnosis of South Africa, dissecting how a criminal corruption complex mechanically paralyzes a state and strangles its economic potential, even blocking vital technologies like Starlink.
We then explored the brutal, effective blueprint of Uttar Pradesh, analyzing how the destruction of organized crime's economic base served as the ultimate catalyst for massive foreign investment. We examined the tactical brilliance of Nepal's Gen Z, using decentralized digital networks to bypass corrupted physical institutions and elect a mandate for rapid growth.
And finally, we looked at the incredible, almost unimaginable stakes of this political struggle. The impending deflationary shock of AI and robotics, promising a world of universal high income and material abundance.
If you're listening to this, the takeaway the author wants you to leave with is the profound urgency of this specific moment in history. Technology is actively trying to offer us a world without material want. But the grim physical reality on the ground, whether your state is governed by the rule of law or the rule of parasites, will absolutely dictate whether you and your community get to cross that threshold into the future.
Which leaves us with a deeply provocative thought to mull over. If artificial intelligence and robotics eventually figure out how to make all physical goods, housing, and healthcare practically free to produce, will bad governance and human corruption be the only things left on Earth capable of keeping humanity in poverty?
It suggests that poverty is no longer a technological problem we have to solve, but a political choice we have to unmake.
That is exactly where we need to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly expansive deep dive. Keep questioning the invisible structures around you, demand better of your systems, and we'll see you next time.